we on episode 3?
Yep, this is 3.
Episode 3, Sad Boys Book Club. My name's Dusty.
And I'm Daniel.
Welcome back. It's been a really long next week, huh?
Yeah, this one took a couple weeks. We had some scheduling conflicts over the last weekend, so took us a brief hiatus. But I
Yeah.
do have some exciting news about something that happened in between these last couple of episodes.
Oh.
I am pleased to announce that we have become the number one ranked English language literature podcast in Iceland. So, first and foremost, I would love to thank all of our wonderful Icelandic colleagues, Icelandic listeners. You know, we love you, we support you, even if you believe in elves, even if you spend a lot of time in your geothermally heated baths, we still love you. Thank you for your support.
I'm gonna be honest, I don't even know if there's a modicum of truth to that.
No, I don't think anybody should look that up. Actually, I think they should trust me implicitly here because that's the kind of podcast we're running here is 100% factual information.
Well, I don't know enough about Iceland to refute you, so I'm going to take it as fact.
They actually a good portion of Icelandic people do believe in elves. It's like a fairly common cultural quirk,
Yeah.
like more than 25%.
Well, for I imagine the fans that were at the edge of their seat last Wednesday being like, "Where's the next episode of the Sad Boys Book Club?" Those people being you and I. Uh,
No, we have at least one other confirmed listener, and also the people in Iceland.
yeah. Uh, so we were talking. It would have been last Thursday or Friday, and I had a pretty busy weekend ahead of me. It
Mhm.
would have been the 11th and the 12th. So my wife and I decided that. Well, I decided, and my wife graciously agreed, and made a major sacrifice for me. That my Valentine's Day, my side of it, was going to be celebrated last Saturday in the form of us going to go see Titanic in 3D together for its 25th anniversary. A movie in which I love and my wife doesn't hate, but does not share my opinion on. So that was my
She's not a
Saturday.
partisan of Big Jim Cameron.
No, I don't, it's not even that. It's just I think there was a lot of Titanic um, watched in the past that kind of made
Mhm.
it which for me that's not that big of a deal, but I guess I'm the weird one here. I like Titanic more than I probably should.
Yeah, you know what? I've never actually seen it.
Are you
I've
serious?
seen No, I'm serious. I have not seen Titanic ever,
All right,
which is
so
strange given how frequently we've hung out over the years.
yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and divert this podcast into the Sad Boys Titanic Club, and we're gonna spend the next 2 hours talking about Titanic. And I'm gonna be talking about Titanic, and you're gonna be like, "Wow, this sounds like a great movie. I'm going to go watch it 5 times in a row," and that'll be the rest of your weekend.
Are we going to become Titanic truthers on this journey, or are we going to stick to mostly the agreed narrative here?
Yeah. I don't know how much you know about the plot, but James Cameron actually proved that there's no way the door could have held. So
Yeah, I think they've done that. I think there was actually one little piece I did know. The one little piece I do know about other than the famous uh, door situation, is that I think the not the book, the movie is actually pretty well regarded by Titanic scholars.
That would not
Right.
surprise me. I know
Yeah.
the two things that I know that are. Is it two things? Let me think for a second here. The things that I know that are like factually inaccurate are how they handled. Oh, what's her name? It's Kathy Bates's character. Like Big Maggie or something like that. How they handled her was inaccurate because in the movie she's like, "We got to go back and pull some of those people out of the water," and the crew guy's just like, "I will throw you off of this if you keep talking," and that she sits down in like defeat. Whereas in actual history, she actually commandeered the boat and went back and rescued some people out of the water. It's a weird thing to kind of not have in the movie. I guess it makes it a little more tragic. But I know that like that's something that is inaccurate in the film.
I feel like that's a pretty big whiff there by old Jim. I mean, that's a great little sequence you got there. That's practically made for a film.
Well, I feel like the reason why he did that is it would have taken away some of the tension and the stakes of Jack and Rose. So that would
Mm.
be my guess. Like it would possibly hurt the story that he was telling. And it's one of those things to where it's like, it's like the elves not being in Helm's Deep. I don't care. It made for a more enjoyable movie, so I will let it slide.
We're back on.
Yeah. Um I forgot what the
I
other
have
thing
a question.
was.
Is this lady wasn't her name Molly Brown or something like that?
Thank you. That's what it was. I couldn't figure.
Because
Yeah.
I've been when I've been to Denver and I think they have a like a hotel, not a hotel, well maybe a hotel, but they've mentioned her in like museums, like that her being she after the Titanic disaster she lived out her days in Denver, I think, and so they have some stuff about her and her life in the Titanic and all that.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, it was Molly Brown. I couldn't remember her name even though I saw the movie like I was watching it at this time 7 days ago. But
Yeah, I'll have to finally sit down and watch it. They didn't have any 3D showings near me. So I didn't go end up looking into it too much.
yeah, in my opinion, it is the last truly great James Cameron film. Which, to be fair, he's only made two movies since then. That being Avatar and Avatar: The Way of Water. And
I Go ahead.
I don't want to sit here and like go on this whole like Avatar's bad tirade because that's how I was until like a month ago, and before going to go see The Way of Water in IMAX 3D, which is how I recommend anybody go see it because it was a wonderful visual experience. Which the first one was too. I saw the first one in 3D as well back when it came out originally, and it was a very cool visual experience. But it was my second time seeing it in like less than a month of it releasing, and I didn't really love it the first time, so I didn't really love it the second time. And it was like, oh, now I got to watch this 3 hour movie that is a visual treat, but is about as entertaining as staring at a rock. So I didn't have as much fun watching the first one in 3D as I did watching the second one since it was the first time seeing it. But I rewatched the
Mhm.
first one the night before seeing the second one, and since it was my first time seeing it in like 13 years, I felt a little more soft on it. Like it's not a great
Mhm.
movie, but it's not a bad movie at the same time. It's just it exists. It has really interesting world building. Like I think the concept of Pandora is more interesting than the story that's told, and I think that also holds true for the second one. But I didn't hate the second one. I thought it was fine. It was a little more original than the first one, which was a nice breath of fresh air for me. I didn't hate the
Mhm.
characters as much as a lot of people seem to. Like I thought the kid characters were fine, honestly, and I'm glad that the movie focused more on them rather than Jake Sully and Natiri. So nothing against Zoe Saldana. Like she was probably the best part of the first movie, but Sam Worthington is not a good actor, and 13 years has not made him any better of an actor. So I am
That's,
okay with
you
as
know,
little Jake Sully as possible.
it's kind of wild what's happened to Sam Worthington's career. Like he in the kind of the aughts, he was kind of like they really tried to pitch him as like the next big actor guy, but it just he just, and he was in some pretty big, like I mean Avatar. the original one. I think they got over 1 billion with that one, but a lot of just like not so great films that he was in, or good films that he was in, that it just his performance was just not particularly remarkable. At least most people didn't find them to be that.
Off the top of my head, the only other movies I can name with Sam Worthington, I know I probably know more. This is just purely off the cuff. Is he was in Terminator Salvation, which wasn't good. And then he was in Clash of the Titans, and was it called Clash of the Gods? The second one. I don't know, those two movies, regardless, and I never saw them, but I heard that they were really bad. Oh wait, what am I talking about? He's also Alex Mason in the Call of Duty Black Ops series, which is like the only thing I can like truly tolerate him in.
Wow, that's quite a. I want to say that's kind of a diss. It's like, hey, best thing you can do is is get out of my face.
I mean,
Like if I
to
can hear your, I can deal with listening to your voice, but if I see your face, I am turning off the screen right away.
I mean, to be fair,
See,
you don't see his face in Avatar 2, since he's in the he is 100% a Navi by the end of the first movie. So
he's in the blue zone.
yeah,
He's blue pilled.
yeah. Um, that really kind of went tangential for me, saying I watched Titanic on Saturday, and that's why we did. That is purely the reason why we didn't record on Saturday. Was me being like, yeah, I'm gonna go see Titanic with the wife in 3D. But to be
And
fair, that
then
ate
that
my entire afternoon.
yeah, and you also had your beloved Kansas City Chiefs
Yes,
won the Super Bowl.
yes. Then
So that's why we
Sunday,
weren't able to do the next day. Which
yes, we were talking
shout
about
out
doing
to
it Sunday.
shout out to Patrick Mahomes. Shout out to the Kansas City Chiefs.
So I am a
Great game.
I will I will admit that like I some people would definitely call me like a bandwagon fan, which is probably fair because I wasn't a fan of the Chiefs before Mahomes, but I also wasn't a fan of football before Mahomes. Like I hadn't been for like over a decade. I kind of fell out of love with it after being essentially force raised into being a Steelers fan, which was great in the mid to late 2000s because they won the Super Bowl in '05 and '08, and then lost to the Packers in was it 2010.
That sounds right.
So 2 for 3 was cool when I was a kid, but I kind of fell out of love of football probably sometime after the second time Eli Manning beat Tom Brady, which was very funny when I was a kid. It was funny the first time, then it was even funnier the second time. Welcome to the Sad Boys Sports Club, by the way. Uh,
Well,
so yeah, I had kind of fallen out of love with football, and I kind of got into the mindset through like my late teens and my early 20s, where I'm like, it's a stupid sport. Only stupid people like football. It's just people running into each other. It's so dumb. And it's just one of those like anti opinions. And
yeah,
but
and
yeah,
I can understand given the context in which you and I were raised, where there was like a lot of pressure to not only watch football but participate in it. So I could see, it if you have any kind of misgivings about, or just like, I don't know, if you just don't want to do it, it can kind of rub you the wrong way. So I kind of gave you a pass for that.
But yeah, say what you will about bandwagoning. I'm personally of the opinion that you should not have to live close to a team in order to be a fan of a team. I think that's just really dumb and really tribal. Like the teams you like for the reasons that you like. Um, but like yeah, it was reading about and hearing about Mahomes and the Chiefs that kind of got me interested again because for me it kind of became stale. That's one of the reasons why I stopped watching. So having that spark essentially be reignited by like the new generation. Like Mahomes was essentially the spark for me, and it kind of got me back into it. So obviously,
Mhm.
I kind of jumped in as I'm gonna check out these Chiefs and see if this is something that'll interest me. And funny enough, the first game I watched was Super Bowl 55, and watching them get absolutely decimated by Tom Brady. Yeah, the divisional round against the Bills last year was just insane with the with 13-second Mahomes driving down into field goal range to tie it up. That was just a crazy game. So yeah,
Yep.
it started with me getting into the Chiefs and being like, wow, this is actually like super fun to watch, and these guys are really talented. And from there, it's kind of expanded to where I'm just like watching a bunch of different teams because they have players that I just love. Like I fell in love with Jalen Hurts and the Eagles this year, which made the Super Bowl fantastic for me because I was like, man, this Eagles team has really impressed me. Jalen Hurts has really impressed me. Dallas Goddard has really impressed me, and it's like, the Super Bowl was great for me because I wanted the Chiefs to win because they are now, I guess, my team. But the Eagles were so fun to watch this year that I was like, man, I can't even be upset if they win. They're just too good. But yeah, I also Josh Allen also really impressed me last year. That made me kind of start following the Bills. I think he kind of has a bit of an attitude too much, but he was fun to watch. Joe Burrow's really fun to watch because he's really talented. Uh, Man, the Jaguars really came out of nowhere this year and became really fun to watch. The Lions were really fun to watch. So it just kind of, it kind of snowballs from there. It started with the Chiefs, so I'm going to love them as long as they have those players that I enjoy watching. But you also have all these other teams that are really fun to watch. So yeah, Super Bowl was great this year. I'm very happy.
Well, I do have some bad news now. We have lost every single Icelandic listener. Um, they have all turned it off, and they are now listening to the Eager Boys Literature Lobby, which is the second leading English language literature podcast in Iceland.
Oh, oops. Um, Football is bad.
Oh,
Uh,
they're back. They're back. They're back.
hey Daniel, you know what I would like to do?
What is that?
How about you and I go on some glacier adventures where we go hiking and caving while horseback riding and kayaking. And then we can also go watch some birds and study Viking heritage while playing golf.
Wow, that sounds like a great time, in fact, especially the hiking and kayaking at the same time.
Yes. I just googled Iceland hobbies, so I needed to make sure that I get that totally real. I almost said age group. That's totally not right. That regional audience back.
You know, I think Iceland is actually pretty cool. I remember, you know,
No, Greenland is the one
Death
that's
Str
cool. Iceland is the one that's green.
I got you. But what's his name? Kojima. When he went to, I think Kojima visited Iceland a little bit before the production of Death Stranding, and you can really see a lot of the impact of like the Iceland in the game, like the very austere but kind of beautiful uh, natural surroundings. The terrain is very Icelandic,
I wish he would have
which is why
visited.
when I played it uh, at first I was a little thrown off because it ostensibly takes place in America, but I was like, this this does not look like anywhere in America that I've seen. But apparently, I think it's actually a lot more representative of Iceland. I'm sorry, you were saying something. Go ahead.
I would have rather him have visited and studied an area that was a little more flat, personally.
Well, once you get that director's cut, it helps out. You get quite a few things that help you out a little bit there.
Yeah, I'll get around to it eventually once I finish the original.
I don't know. Good. I really liked those or that game. I thought it was. I didn't really expect to like it, but there's something about the kind of the contemplative nature of it that I found like weirdly relaxing.
Yeah, it almost reminds you of really kind of abstract books like House of Leaves.
Correct. It does. And what luck that we are reading House of Leaves.
Yes,
So
I should get a Segway award for my remarkable segues into the topic of today's podcast.
when we last left off, I remember us talking a little bit about how we wanted to talk about Exploration 4 because we kind of where we were at in the story, they'd already kind of started that, but we wanted to kind of touch on it cohesively as we kind of as the event came to a conclusion, I guess of sorts, and now where we're at in the book, the expedition, such as it was, has come to an end, a rather grisly end, in fact. So unfortunately, your friend Jed, Jed's dead.
Oh boy, is he?
Got a bullet in his head.
The only person I actually
It
really
was made
wanted to
of lead.
survive. Yeah, he was the only person I wanted to survive in this whole thing. I knew he wasn't going to.
No,
I'm thinking if we're lucky, maybe one person will. I had already written Holloway off because of the what we were given of exploration for at the beginning of the book. I'd already written
the
him
only
off.
way Jed could have been more obviously going to die is if Danielewski had written, and he was wearing a red shirt as he entered the hallway. So he's about as they were really kind of telegraphing that one.
Yeah. And as they were walking into the hallway, Jed said to Navidson, "Ooh, I can't wait until we break through and get the payday from this because I need to fund my foundation for orphan kids and puppies."
And he totally would have done that because Jed was an upstanding guy.
Yeah, then Navidson replied, "You are a good man, Jed, and I cannot wait to see you again."
Don't worry about your fiance.
You have a
I
good
just
head
I
on your shoulders.
But yeah, it's so the exploration form, that was kind of it's kind of a, I don't know, I thought that's kind of an interesting sort of microcosm of a lot of the things that Danielewski is wanting to kind of talk about here.
Yeah.
It's just the hubris of man, kind of in the face of this, of the unknown and the unknowable, the sort of like, and then there's the interpersonal conflict. It's not only do you have like um, this sort of postmodern uh, man versus the unknowable kind of conceit here. You also kind of have that classic, man versus self in terms of like Holloway, kind of succumbing to his own, lust for adventure and notoriety, and how it ends up costing them. But speaking of he basically, they went into the hallway. How many days were they in before he decided to go sicko mode?
It was like
Like
8.
it was. Oh, was it 8 days? Okay.
Yeah.
For some reason, I thought that happened on like. Again, it's been a couple weeks since we've read that portion, but I guess it was 8 days before he just totally snapped.
Yeah. Well, I think Holloway wasn't going in fully cocked, so to say, because
Uh, it, it, Go ahead.
because it almost feels like, which I think Danielewski all but says this in the text through Zapano, that
Mhm.
I feel like for him he was there for the monster and not for. I mean, I don't even know, like, what's the end game at this point other than, because there's, for Navidson and Holloway
It's
there's this idea of fame from it, but with Holloway I feel like it's about the hunt, and Navidson I feel like it's about this unknown entity being the hallway, the labyrinth, all of that. But what's the actual plan here other than get to the bottom of the staircase? Like, then what? What's the exploration culminating in other than just, yeah, let's just go down there and see what happens, and then we'll come back, and then we'll go back down there and see what happens, then we'll come back and then go down there and see what happens.
I think it's kind of like a caving expedition. So I think in theory he wants to go. This is my interpretation of Holloway's motivation here. He wants to go down as deep as he possibly can go. Uh, Presumably, I think he's looking for the end, such as it can exist in this in the house. Um, I think he just wants to go there, reach the end, and then come back and then say, "Hey, look, I just explored the this massive uh, domain that, by all laws of physics, should not exist," and then thus get a bunch of notoriety from that. Because I think he does run like some sort of expedition company, which I guess those still exist, I guess. But I think I think that was his original motivation, is he wanted to really make his name, so that his company could really, I guess, reap the benefit of that.
Yeah, he wanted to Lewis and Clark that shit.
He was like, by the end of this journey, my name is going to be Lewis Clark. I'm not. I'm nobody's going to be more of the king of adventure than I am. I
Would
think
that
that was his goal. Was
would
he wanted to be that guy.
would that have made Jed
But
Sacagawea?
um, I think that would make Jed. I don't even know. I don't think there's an analog. Was there somebody on the
Well, he was the
on well
navigation expert. He was the guy that was supposed to know always which way's north, ostensibly.
oh I guess of sorts. I guess of a sort he could be analogous there, but he's but yeah, I'm not really sure that there is like a very I think with a lot of this, there's the unclarity of motivation. I think is something of the point, is like it's this idea of like, so not only the house existing as the sort of unknowable like mystery, but it and of the Zampano's work also being this sort of semi indecipherable at times kind of like mystery. I think this is a lot about how it's difficult to know other people, their own hidden depths. And I think that's something that he kind of touches on when he goes through, and he mentions, um, oftentimes with women, but but really with anybody, they're the like the how past traumas, both mental and physical, um, create these dimensions within people that are much like the hallway, kind of dark and difficult to understand and comprehend.
Hmm. And meanwhile, we got Wax, who's just kind of there.
Wax, the mountain party boy, who was the first one to get shot actually
He
before Jed. Um,
he fell for the classic. Oh, look, it's a jug of water trap.
yeah, that was wild. That was why I. So I guess let's talk about a little bit about why about the sicko mode moment that Holloway went down. So I think from what we can interpret from Holloway is, and again, we are once again struck with the problem of the unreliable narrator here. Is Holloway mentions that he thought Wax was the monster because he saw him from a distance. After they, I guess we if we back up a little bit, before that incident, um, Holloway or Wax and Jed were pretty adamant that they needed to turn back, and Holloway, of course, as we mentioned, totally drunk on power and a lust for fame, and also probably a not insignificant amount of just a sunk cost fallacy. Like we've already come this far, we have to see it through. Um, but a lot of that was they just kind of they didn't feel that way, so they decided to turn around, and he did not like that. So that they didn't leave on the best of terms. So I think there is, I think, something of like a, as we see with the later behavior of Holloway. I think I'm not entirely convinced that he didn't willfully kill them.
Yeah, I think that his excuse is pretty paper thin, especially since after he shoots Wax in the shoulder, I think it was, right?
Yeah,
Um, he just kind of keeps going at it. Like he's chasing after
yeah, he
both
can.
of them. As soon as Jed turns on his light, he fires in their direction, so he's having to like travel in the dark ostensibly. And there's no way. Well, okay, so this is the second time they Holloway ambushes them because the first time when he shoots Wax, he's just like, "Oh, damn, thought you were the monster." Anyways, and he just leaves.
That was so weird. Like that was such a bizarre passage about him, like kind of running up to them and Jed just imploring him to be like, "Come on, look, we can just say it was an accident. Let's just get it." Because I don't think Jed fully believed it was an accident in that moment, but I think he was just he wanted he wanted Holloway to not do what he ultimately did, which was to essentially abandon them to their deaths and or just kill them in that moment.
Yeah, he's just like, "No, I can't go to prison. I'm gonna go to prison." And Jed's like, "No, you ain't, dude. It's cool. Let's just get out of here. It's fine." He's like, "No, no, no. I'm definitely going to prison. All right, bye." He just leaves. And it's like,
Just
man,
runs out into the darkness.
I don't think there's some screws loose. I don't. I think the screws are missing at this point.
I think at this point it's like, what screws?
But yeah. So then he finds them later again, and just it's just I'm gonna kill you now. It's just I'm too far gone. So
I think he kind of came to that conclusion. He was just like he was like he did, definitely there was some sort of mental calculus there in which he decided, no, I'm just going to kill them. I think again it's kind of a sunk cost fallacy. This idea of like I've already gone so far in in shooting Wax, I might as well finish them off because otherwise they're going to tell um, Navidson, the world, the police, whatever, that there's a crazy guy down there with a rifle just blasting anybody he comes into contact with at this point.
do you think the temporal labyrinth works like international waters do?
Um, to be honest, I would be okay from a philosophical philosophical bent. I would say maybe I would be inclined to say yes. However, I think the legal system would hold that this is a violation of American laws.
At the trial,
That's not to excuse him, of course, for his his acts. That's not what I intend at all. But I'm just like from a purely philosophical perspective, I don't know that you can. I'm not even sure that this metaphysical anomaly space can be even categorized as being on Earth. To be quite frank with you.
yeah, at the at Holloway's trial, the defense attorney pulls up a video from the Navidson report of the dogs, and he's like, "If the dogs don't fit, you must acquit."
If it, yeah, that's pretty much. If the dogs can't fit, you must acquit. That's pretty much that's the beginning and ending of my, uh, not of my of the legal defense of Holloway. There, it's like, look, I'm it if it doesn't count if it's in a parallel dimension of unending hallways and and also of just
A
of
hypothetical
unending
minotaur.
staircases. Look, if the murder is committed in the presence of a minotaur, it does not count.
Yeah.
That's the minotaur defense. Um, but I think it's kind of along the lines of the this idea of the minotaur and all the other stuff. Um, as Wax and Jed were leaving after they parted ways with Holloway after following him down. And this is okay. I'm sorry. I'm doing a tangent to a tangent here, but you guys you'll have to bear with me here. Um, this is interesting because this is kind of an idea that I have that's kind of been germinating. Is this idea that the interior space of the hallway is not fixed, and we know this, but I think some one factor that is a determinant um, is the psychological the way that the person that's entering the space, how they perceive things, I think will will warp the space in some way or another. I think, for instance, I think that's why it was so the staircase for them, they were going down it for days and days and days. It was because really in some really insidious way, the the house or the Minotaur, whatever entity is in control of this space, knew what they were looking for or knew their expectation somehow. This idea that they were going to uh, go on this long journey and they were going to find something. And in that way, it kind of warped the dimensions of the house to this unimaginable level where they're having to go down. They're going down for days and days on end. However, as we see later, when Navidson goes to try to save them, they're able to rig up a pulley system using a pretty standard rope. So I think there's something about this idea of how expectation creates or informs in a large part the reality of this world that they're in.
Yeah. I just want to quickly say he has a name, and it's Mr. Monster.
Mr. Monster. Shout out to Tom.
Yeah. The unsung hero of the Navidson record, Tom, who is afraid of going down the stairs.
But you know what? I gotta say it really worked out for them. His fear of going down the stairs.
Yeah.
Um, but backing it, we'll get back to Tom. But so as they're after they parted from Holloway, Wax and Jed, as they're coming back up, they're finding they've left some supply caches, and this is a thing I thought was actually like a really cool, really smart idea. Is like leaving at regular intervals and marking supply caches as they're heading down the steps, because
Yeah.
I think that would make it just so much easier to on a return trip to not have to lug all that stuff up with you, and also save you a lot of energy heading down.
Yeah.
Um, but as they're coming up, they're finding these caches, and they're seeing that they're being more and more, I want to say, interfered with, because they're not all like some. There is like some of them are destroyed, and some of them are tampered with. You got things opened. You have like some of the neon marker being ripped off the wall, that kind of stuff. And especially as they're surfacing more and more, um, you start to see the interference increasing as they go up, which is something I thought was kind of interesting. Um, I would have figured, the further you go in, the more you would be subject to this presence of the Minotaur. However in whatever form he might be. But that does not actually necessarily seem to be the case. Um, Also, as we saw with our good friend Tom, he seems to just kind of, I don't know. I don't think that it's necessarily depth. I think he likes to hang out. I think actually pretty close to the surface, because he's kind of out there, kind of haunting Tom, so to say. And then as Tom decides he's gonna like start descending, he hears him like right next to him, and then he runs out.
Yeah, that was a cool little bit with the when Tom when Navidson's like, "Hey Tom, I need you to come down the stairs," and Tom's starting to do it, and then everything's just going weird and just crazy. He's just like, "Nope, nope, nope, can't do it," and he just leaves.
I was so disappointed in Tom. I can, I mean, I understood, but I was so disappointed. And then he comes back through when he rigs up the pulley, um, to get them out. Oh, I was like, oh, Tom,
Yeah,
I am so sorry I ever doubted you.
yeah. Cue the that scene from Dumb and Dumber. Think you pull a stunt like that and totally redeem yourself?
Exactly. Um, let's see. But where we were with got our pals Wax and Jet. So they go off into this hallway. How do they re-encounter Holloway?
I
All
think
this saying Holloway and hallway
I I
is
think
giving me semantic satiation. I can't tell them apart anymore.
I think he just starts shooting at him again, and they're like, "Oh shit!" And then they have to go.
Well, they I think they like break off. I think they hear something, and they break off into a little one of the hallways, like just off one of these landings that they get to as they go up the stairs, and that's where they encounter him. Or at least that was my recollection of it. Let me see. Let me consult my notes real quick. Okay. So yeah, it looks like that's kind of what happened. Is he, just consulting my notes here, it looks like Holloway just he basically kind of leaves them to their own devices earlier, but then later, like he's had a full break with reality, and he comes out of nowhere and starts shooting at them again. It's
Yeah,
interesting. I guess it was almost like he was just looking for them, and he was just like, no, I've had enough. And I think that's kind of a thing. I think that it was his desire because he's going deeper in, and they're going up. They're going back up, and somehow he beats them to where they're at, and then finds them to kill them. I think there is a very this is another example of the psychology of the person that enters the house, um, impacting in some way how they are able to move through it. You know.
yeah, yeah. It definitely seems like how it's set up. There is just no. It's not really news that there's no rhyme or reason to how it goes. What with the staircase taking 3-4 days for them to get down, and then with Davidson it's 100 feet. Uh,
Hmm.
it Holloway could not have gotten to them again, especially at level with them, unless one there was some other staircase he found, or two the hallways were just like, yeah, you're suddenly like a couple hours up in terms of elevation, so here you go, you're back at him.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I think, and as I'm looking at the book again, this is there's some kind of interesting things that are happening in terms of how the book is being presented. Like at this portion, there's like it's difficult to just describe it. I think you would have to almost own the book yourself. And so I'm looking at, especially around page 120, 121 through really, I think pretty much 1 150 almost. Like there's this running along the sides of the text are these like the it's citing these houses and buildings of a particular architectural style on the left side, and these this just interminably long list of names on the right side, citing all these people. And then as it's going through, one thing I think that's kind of interesting, there's this blue box of text, and as you kind of read it, it reads as like a bit of like a list of it's one it starts off as a footnote, kind of talking about this architectural feature of the house, but and it just goes on for pages and pages, like almost 20 pages. But it's this little tiny box that takes up maybe a little section on the right side, And what's interesting about it is that when you can read it, then you look on the reverse side and you see that it's what you just read in reverse. So it's almost like you're kind of looking through it, like it's transparent, and
Yeah.
you're reading. That's kind of an interesting little thing there.
Yeah. That it's definitely cool from an aesthetic standpoint, but that whole section kind of annoyed me because you have like on the margins you have just useless information, and then even in those boxes it's just useless information, and I just have to ask why. What's the point?
Yeah, I think that's one thing that's kind of and we kind of get as we're in this section. Johnny is calling out Zampano again, where he says he essentially what he says is Zampano is just incredibly pretentious. Like all of these things that he does, and his use of like untranslated foreign language quotes, usually in French. He's like, it doesn't make any sense. It says nothing about Holloway's choices or Jed's request. Nothing, it doesn't even seem remotely applicable. So I think there's something there. Um, but you kind of run into the problem. This is one of the big problems of parody when you can no longer really differentiate between um, the subject of a parody and the parody itself. It's like this idea of like these impenetrable and confusing texts by academics and pseudo academics like Zampano. It's regardless of whether or not it's done intentionally or periodically. It's kind of either way. It's not really. I don't find it particularly helpful or explicative or really just anything in terms of how it helps the novel as a whole. Now there are other things that happen. Um, the other little choices that Zampano slash Danielewski makes that do um, really kind of a great job of capturing the feel of something um, in a visual way, but using the text on the page, um, which is to kind of bring us back here to Wax and Jed on the stairs, or not on the stairs, I guess at this point. At this point, I think they ran from Holloway, and they're kind of in hiding in this little room, this little side room. Um, here we go again, kind of with Jed. He's tapping on the wall. He's banging on the wall, trying to get the attention of Navidson and his family inside. And he's knocking. But what's interesting here is that he's just knocking. But what they're hearing is, or what Navidson and his family hear is is the tapped out version of the SOS signal. But that's not what as we you see when you see what Jed is doing, and that they kind of like juxtapose them side by side. That's not he's just knocking on it. The house is somehow taking the intentionality and the psychology of Jed, and it's translating it back to them as this as what it is. It's an SOS. It's a call for help.
Yeah, which makes you wonder how much of the house is malicious.
I think that's a fair question. I don't. If the house and the Minotaur can be said to be distinct entities, uh, or even if they are distinct entities and the house is under whether it is or is not influenced by the Minotaur, I think the house is not really malicious in and of itself. I think it is just a catalyst almost. Like it just whatever you are bringing into the house is what it's kind of like the evil tree in Empire Strikes Back that Luke goes into, you know, and he asks Yoda what's in there, and Yoda pretty much gives him that. He's like you what you bring into it is what you're going to uncover in there, and that's kind of what I think we're seeing in terms of the uh, the the people, the expeditionary party so far. I think that's very explicative of their experience here. Um, and then Zampano does this thing that I find um, very curious, where he likens this doomed expedition to another couple of expeditions that had a mutiny. And I don't know. At first I sort of took exception to this idea that um, Wax and Wax and Jed were staging a mutiny as such. It was almost really a mutiny from above, like this idea of like because Holloway is really in charge here, and yet he kind of refused to see reason, and he kind of because I don't think Navidson's parameters that he gave to Holloway were necessarily like a strict like you have to do X. Like that I think going in their mission parameters were very vague. And I think that's another reason why um, this like many other 20th century or early 21st century um, expeditions, campaigns, what have you. This going in with very loosely set parameters, um, leading to extreme disaster and death, is like this idea. So they went in without a lot of foresight and thought here, and it kind of ended in a terrible way. So I that's kind of my little thing here is I don't know that I would count them as mutineers per se. I think Holloway was really the one that's just kind of he just totally, you know, lost all sense of proportionality and comportment. But anyway, he kind of mentions a couple of famous mutinies, including I actually didn't know too much about Magellan and his one of his expeditions. He kind of mentions it, and it's kind of the mutiny is kind of put down. Um,
Yeah, that was
and then
kind of
there's kind
funny.
of like this. Oh, go ahead.
That was just kind of funny to read about.
That was kind of amusing. He also kind of likens it to the Hudson expedition, in mapping out what would later be Hudson Bay. I thought that was a lot more applicable as like this idea of like going into the cold and being left for dead, left without rations and all that. I think that's um, more of a one to one here. Uh, he also mentions the mutiny on the Skylab over bad working conditions and a difficult relationship with the commander the commander over the mission. See, and then he also quoted he also committed one of the what potentially what some people consider a sin is this quote he quotes heavily also from Coleridge's Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Um, yeah, this yeah, and a lot of this stuff like space, like the Hudson expedition, it brings to them a lot of like cold imagery of coldness. I think that's one of the things that they mention they keep going back to is this idea that the house is this cold place. It's because the Rime of the Ancient Mariner portion we're talking about, and ice, mast high, came floating by, as green as an emerald. This the land of ice and of fearful sounds, where no living thing was to be seen. You know, it's just that I think he quotes that quite aptly. It's this idea of this very cold, dead place. Uh, but yeah, as you know, we go along, we get a little bit more. Uh, he Danielewski slash Zampano hits this theme again of like, while in the past live footage was limited to the aftermath, the oral histories given by the survivors or photographs taken by pedestrians. These days, the proliferation of affordable video cameras and tapes have created more of an opportunity for someone to record a plane wreck or bank robbery as it is actually taking place. Of course, no documentary is ever entirely absolved from the suspicion that the mise en scene may have been carefully designed, with action staged or lines written and rehearsed, much of which of these days is carried out under the appellation of reenactment. So, it's and then he kind of mentions some other things, where that might have happened. He also has a reference to America's Funniest Home Videos, which apparently is still your parents are probably still watching. Apparently that's still on the air. Um, And he kind of ends, currently the greatest threat comes from the area of digital manipulation. And so it's interesting because I know we've talked um, at length about that idea, but I think it's interesting that he kind of comes out directly and he addresses it. Um, and he alleges that the um, New York Times ran an article about it, which perhaps they did at some point, but you know, who can say with this book, which of these footnotes are and aren't true.
Yeah. Which, with that, I'd like to talk about this.
Hmm,
So, I gotta be honest with you.
hmm,
I'm kind of getting tired of the whole, as so and so once said, and then quote by them, footnote with the book, and then as so and so said about so and so, and then a quote from them. It just, especially since I know that most of these are fake, probably all of them are fake, unless it's something that is
hmm.
actually real, cited from history thing or whatever. I
Well,
don't know.
some
It's
of them are real. I've looked at some of them, and I should have done. That's something looking back. I wish I had done a better job of is mentioning which of these that I found that are real. And there's also some that are interesting that they are. I can't tell whether they are real because they are like legitimately real, like, or if they were created by fans after the fact.
yeah, but it's just I don't know. It's getting kind of old for me to have Zampano go on these huge like they're I guess by his technicality they wouldn't be tangents or rants or anything, but to me they just feel super unnecessary, and just him being like, I am a very smart intellectual and I'm going to show you why I'm a very smart intellectual by telling you things that are tangentially related to the story I'm trying to tell you but have nothing really to do with anything other than just filling up my word count. And it's just it's so, it feels so unnecessary and bloated to just have him constantly go off on things that he feels relates to the Navidson record, but to me it's just a major time waster because like I don't care about how it relates to echoes or what this has to do with when there a bit about, no, that was with Johnny, that was a Johnny thing, I'll get to that later. um yeah, it's he goes off on these huge expanses where he's talking about how all of these different authors who have written about either the Navidson record specifically or something that he can correlate to the Navidson record in terms of like similar themes or ideas, and then just writes all this stuff about what they're saying. And then it also kind of, I would count it as well when he's going into the thing about the mutinies that relate. And I just feel like he just kind of loses, he loses me at least, and I think he kind of loses the plot because this is supposed to be essentially a recounting of the Navidson record, and then it just basically becomes a bibliography at some
Hmm.
point. And I don't know. To me, I'm starting to kind of glaze over with Zappano's work that isn't solely focused on the Navidson
Yeah,
record
I think
itself.
that's I think we both kind of have voiced that here today. Is kind of there's I think there's a little bit of um, whether these are choices that Danielewski is imputing to Zampano or his own choices in how he's presenting this book. I think it's kind of it's maybe wearing on us just a little bit. I think we're kind of getting to the point where there's like diminishing returns with some of these things.
Yeah, like I
Um,
feel like I've spent a lot of time reading stuff that I feel personally does not enhance my enjoyment or understanding of the book itself. It just feels like fluff, intellectual, like pseudo intellectual fluff that is supposed to be
mhm.
a you just don't have a high enough IQ to understand Zappano kind of
I
thing.
don't I don't know that that's necessarily the case. I think that may be to a certain extent. But I think what it's supposed to be more is like this idea. It's supposed to mimic the house, right? In the sense of like you're going through these hallways of like it's just, but you're not really sure where it's going, and you're not really sure what the what we're supposed to be taking from. It's just you're supposed to feel kind of like lost and kind of surrounded by the text. You know, I think that's what he's trying to kind of create in you is like this sense of being like all of these individual pathways branching off of the main narrative that that are just that themselves can branch off through in infinite in sundry ways. It's just kind of like I was saying. It's like there's the intent behind it makes it artistic, but it doesn't necessarily make it
Entertaining.
particularly engaging for the reader. Um, and that's something that I kind of I think that's something that we are both beginning to struggle with here.
Well, I wouldn't mind that so much, if not for the fact that, at least to me, that's what I feel like we're already getting through Johnny Truant. So it almost feels
Hmm.
like he's double dipping into this concept through both Zappano and Johnny, and it's just not really working for me anymore.
Hmm.
And
It's their diminishing returns. It's to the point where yeah, it's happening too much.
yeah, and it's also, and maybe this is because of Zappano, it happening with Zappano as well, but it's really starting to hurt with Johnny Truant as well. To really quickly go into this, um, oh god, what was the story for? Was it the which one was it?
Is it about the
Okay,
burns? Oh god.
so the entire point of the story that Johnny is telling is how Texas and Texas are two different things. And there's like it's what like 2 pages where he just goes on this literary blurb talking about I couldn't even tell you what. And it it's because it all stemmed from him having that memory just click for him, and suddenly he gets that wash of clarity when he was talking with Ashley, who ended up not being Thumper. By the way, I was wrong about that. When he was talking to her, and she was just like, "Yeah, you know, I wanted to have sex with you when back in Texas." And he's like, "I've never been to Texas." And then there's that moment of clarity where he's like, "Oh, not Texas, the state. The name Tex at Texas house." Ah, and then he has that like moment of clarity. But then he goes on talking about like I think at one point he's talking about the moon and the sea. Or no, it was like the oh god, was it the fisherman? What was he talking about? It was the boat. Yeah, it was that boat that capsized, and it had like it was a boat that capsized, and there was a grease fire or an oil fire that caused an explosion, and the boat sank.
Mhm.
And there was that one guy that was left sealed in that cabin, who I'm assuming suffocated to death or died from the pressure or a combination of both. And this is all,
You would be the expert now after having seen the Titanic again.
well, the Titanic doesn't pull a Prometheus and flip over, but
That's true.
but he's talking about this shipwreck that happens and everybody dying on this shipwreck and the scout plane not even knowing where it was at because they sank in 12 minutes and all of this stuff. And it's all supposed to be, I guess, an allegory for a memory coming back to him that is supposed to relate to him meeting this girl that he fell in love with at Texas that he didn't see until like what, a decade or so later. He said he was 18, and then has
Yeah,
sex with
it's
her the weekend
somewhere seven
before
to
her.
10 years later.
Yeah, and then he has sex with her the weekend before her wedding or whatever it was. And it's just it's one of those things where I think my eyes kind of glaze over and I'm reading it, but I'm not really absorbing it anymore, but I'm aware of it. And it's starting to become a little too much for me to the point to where I'm honestly considering just skipping these sections. I probably won't because I'm stubborn, but I'm honestly considering it to where because I'm really interested in Johnny's commentary because I said this last time, I find his story more interesting than the Navidson report, and I'm really engaged with the Navidson report at the same time. So there's these two really cool stories that are being told together that are really interesting, but there's so much useless fluff just being thrown into it to pad it out. It's almost like it's kind of like when you're playing a really really good video game that has a great story and great characters and you love following it, but then you hit a roadblock and it says you cannot progress the story until you complete these 13 fetch quests. And the fetch quests are basically, hello hero, my sheep ran off and is in the next town over. Can you go over to the next town over and very slowly escort my sheep back to my pen? It's just like stuff like that, and it's like what it feels like for an equivalency, and I can't get back to the things I'm interested in until I just slog through this useless, very prettily written information dump that has no real relevance to anything. And I do feel like it is hurting my opinion on the book overall. I feel like I've kind of started to. You can probably take a lot of what I've said from episode 1 all the way to now and find a general downward slope on my opinion of this book. Even though the story has gotten better, the book experience I feel like has gotten worse because of it. At least that's how I'm feeling.
Mhm.
It's just it's a lot, and it feels like it's getting not necessarily worse because I feel like it's stayed pretty consistent on how much it's been happening. It's just it's like you said, it's diminishing returns. I'm getting fatigued from it to the point to where it's not me being like I'm ready to be done with this book. I'm just ready to be done with this filler nonsense.
Sure, I think that's fair. And it's kind of interesting, actually, as this section that we read went on. It started doing the inverse, right? Where here you're seeing all this sort of like these endless cascading pages of nonsense. We started getting pages that were just very short and to the point. So they as where we were talking about, Wax and Jed, they'd gone down into the or they went off to this passage, and Jed is beating on the wall trying to send some message to the Navidsons because the radio doesn't work anymore at the depth that they're at. And so Navidson and Reston and Tom, they mount this expedition, and they head in, um, and Karen, true to her word, is seemingly like, at this point she seems that she's pretty much done with the relationship. I think she's She's where she's considered. I think she's staying out of some sort of residual, staying at and listening out for them as sort of a residual love for Navidson and for the family. But I think after this, the way she, at least when in some of her conversations with Tom over the radio, she's she seems like she's pretty much done here with the relationship. But anyway, they go in, Navidson, Reston, and Tom, and
Yeah.
Reston and Navidson they descend into the and further into the house, and Tom's he's hanging back as kind of like a radio relay of sorts. Um, he's hanging out. He's and we see this interesting portion of the book that's just like a running transcript of the things that Tom is saying, talking to himself. And he's making these sort of silly ribald jokes. He's smoking some weed. He's talking to the monster, or at least what he thinks he is anyway. He keeps referring to him as Mr. Monster. He's talking to Karen over the radio, and Karen is sharing her thoughts about how she wants Davidson to come back, but at the same time she's kind of like I said, she's pretty much done with the relationship. He's trying to play a peacemaker, but I think it's pretty much just done at this point. But anyway, we go and we start to see Navidson, and as Navidson and Reston descend through the cave or descend through the house, the pages start to have fewer and fewer words to the point where it's like a paragraph and a half on a page.
Not even.
And so you're right, and it even gets down to a blank page at one point.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of going through this as they're nearing Wax and Reston. They hear this door, um, and from behind the door, they can hear like this sort of whimpering sound. So they start like trying to beat down the door, and they kind of and it's interesting because they also mention that Navidson also has his or yeah, not Navidson. Reston is filming it, and they beat down the door, and they find Wax and Jed. They're just totally like suffering from the infection in Wax's case, and this just abject exhaustion in the case of Jed. And we are just they're there's horrified at first because they think that the behind the door. I'm not sure why Navidson doesn't think to call out like, "Hey, it's me, it's Navidson. I'm here to get you guys out." But so Jed is convinced that it's either Holloway or the monster or something, and he's basically dead. So he's horrified, and then so after Navidson beats through the door, he's relieved. He's they're laughing, they're crying, they're just and it kind of ends with this little bit here. In a scattering of seconds, a 33-year-old man from Vineland, New Jersey, who loves to drink Seattle coffee and listen to Lyle Lovett with his fiancee, learns his sentence has been remitted. He will live. And then, and
And then
then
he gets shot in
immediately
the
thereafter,
face.
exactly. And it kind of gives us a way. It talks about it likens the portion of the film where where Jed's head is exploded by a large caliber bullet to the Zapruder film. It even like he goes down. He gets really granular with the detail here. He's talking about like obviously we have no access to it because this is not real, but like he's even like saying like on this rail on this frame you see the bullet entering his head. You see the the uh, the bits of his head kind of like coming apart, and then that's when we get into like the very blank pages where there's only a little bit of a word or there's only a few words, and you really kind of you're sinking in a very interesting this. So we were talking a lot about how some of the excesses of these stylistic choices kind of negatively impact the book. I think this was actually a very good stylistic choice. Of like you like really slowing down like to only just a word or two words on a page,
It
and
creates
even
an
just a blank to
emphasis.
really get you to absorb what's going on there, you know?
Yeah, it creates an emphasis, and the two that really stick out in my mind so far are that one with Jed's death and the one with the rope
Hmm.
snapping when they're hauling up Reston up the staircase.
Hmm.
I really loved how they did that with when the rope was stretching and then snapping, you had the text stretching and then snapping. And I thought that was
Yeah.
really cool. It gives you a visual representation on the page without illustration,
Hmm.
which I think is really cool.
I think that is, and I think I want to give Danielewski his fair due here. We were complaining a little bit about some of the excesses of some of these stylistic choices, but I think in those moments it's actually very effective, and I would like to see maybe some more books try to really take that to really solidify these big moments and give them the sort of impact that they deserve, you know?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a hard beast to straddle because with House of Leaves, that's kind of one of its selling points is its weird off kilter formatting scheme. So I don't think you could necessarily do that in we'll just say like a sci-fi novel where you have and then in the space battle the main ship destroyed the enemy ship and you have that moment where it's the POV of the villain, his ship's being blown up, and it's you spread that out across like 3 pages in like 2 sentences. I don't think that would necessarily work in a book like that because it's something that really only lends credence to the way that the House of Leaves is as a whole. But
Hmm.
I think that conceptually, in terms of taking a breath between moments and spacing them out and giving them a large emphasis without having to, like I said, illustrate it. It's something that should be looked into, I think, with other authors without having to essentially have a bunch of blank pages on your book.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I think I think that's interesting. I would like that. I don't know. I might like to see some experimentation, even within the example that you were saying as like kind of a counterexample. I kind of was picturing it in my mind, and I kind of like it. I don't know. I think it's something that would be worth kind of exploring.
Yeah, it's something that you would see in a movie where the pace kind of slows down and the music gets all slow tempo and one note, and you have this moment where the character has a time slows down moment before the big consequence happens. It's that
Hmm.
scene. I don't have a specific example because my mind is blank, but it's that scene. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. I hope you know what I'm talking about at least with when I how I describe that. It's like that in a literary form.
Right. Yeah, I can definitely see that. That is a good comparison. But yeah, I really I don't know. So that's this interesting moment. So and we're left with Navidson and Reston. Their shock and horror at seeing um, Jed just get executed there. Um, and then Reston has this moment that I find very cool, at least, where it's revealed that he's been bringing the or he brought an HK 45 pistol with him, which I think that is the handgun that Solid Snake uses in, is it MGS1 or MGS2? I forget
Is that the
which. Well, I think
SOCOM?
he actually uses the SOCOM in both of those. I think that is the SOCOM, I think, or at least maybe like a civilian model of it.
It says the HK-45.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. Well, I'm sure any gun nuts who happen to be listening to this are screaming and crying at our getting it wrong, but or at my getting it wrong. But anyway, I think it's really cool. So he draws that and he starts to return fire at the darkness. Since when did you bring a gun? Davidson asks, crouching near the door. Are you kidding me? This place is scary. You know.
Yeah, that line is kind of silly, but it's whatever.
Yeah, but the moment is cool though. I'm very happy that Reston had the handgun on him.
Yeah.
Um,
And then later on, there's going to be the final showdown between Navidson and Holloway, and Holloway is going to be like, "It's over, Navidson. I have the high ground." And then Navidson's going to be like, "But do you have this?" And he pulls out a hand grenade, and Holloway's like, "Where the hell did you get a hand grenade?" And he's just like, "Are you kidding me? This place is scary." Then he just throws the hand grenade at Holloway and just blows him up. But the camera is intact.
of course, that's what that only just one piece of shrapnel just went through Holloway's head, but did not do
Yeah.
anything else.
It's a standard issue hand grenade, which is not like the movies because it shoots out it's an area of effect like a dome of just pure shrapnel. That's how hand grenades work. It's not just a boom explosion. It's just metal flying everywhere. But all that metal misses Holloway except for one that goes right through his forehead and out the back of his head, and he's just like, you get one final oh, and then he just falls over, and Davidson's like, whoa, what luck, my camera wasn't hit. And then the stairs suddenly become 2 steps long, and he's like, oh, hell yeah, and he just takes his 2 steps up. And then he comes back out, and his children hug him, and what's her name? Karen?
Yeah, Karen.
Karen's like, oh my god, I love you, you're the greatest, and then they have 8 more kids. And he gets another
They
Pulitzer.
basically they entirely changed the tone of the story.
Oh,
It become
I should
this
tell you.
becomes the inflection point where this becomes like a mid tier network drama.
Yeah, I should tell you, by the way, I finished the book last night. I'm actually talking about what happens.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, since you finished the book, did you know that they actually speaking of illustration, they did illustrate that scene.
The one with the hand grenade?
No, they actually did illustrate the scene with Reston returning fire.
I haven't
Do you have the
checked.
book on you?
I do.
Turn to page 659.
Yeah, I haven't checked any of the appendixes or exhibits yet. You
Well,
said
it's
659?
659. I actually found this when I was trying to run down a reference in an appendix um, earlier, and then I realized when I was reading through it later, this is what it's referencing. It's kind of interesting. So you see the. Let me know when you get there. Actually.
Oh, yeah, I've seen this picture before. How have I seen this
So
picture
yeah,
before?
it's kind of interesting. It's like this graphic novel kind of style of how they're being shot at, and then you know Reston's returning fire, and Navidson is using the strobe of the flash to kind of show you where Holloway is in the darkness.
Did
So
this
it's I don't know. I thought that was kind of cool to show that scene, and it shows them saying the same things, like including the since when did you bring a gun? You know,
did this picture come up earlier in the book?
I don't think so. I seem to recall I found it when I was looking to read an appendix reference. I think specifically it was an appendix reference that said when you got there, actually this doesn't exist, something to that effect. And it was kind of like, oh man, are you kidding me?
I've seen this before. I've seen this exact picture before. I don't know
Yeah,
what.
I don't know. Maybe it did come up.
Maybe it was in because I've been watching a lot of not really like fringe YouTube, but like something more along the lines of um what was it called? Not not like ARGs, but things like Marble Hornets. What do they call that? It's called something horror.
Is it like analog horror? Is that what you're
Thank you.
talking
Yes,
about?
exactly. Yeah, I've been watching a lot of YouTube channels that cover like analog horror and true crime. So maybe it would have come up there. I don't know why it would come up there, but I can't think of what else it would be though, because it wouldn't have been on like Reddit or anything. That's weird. I've seen that before, and I can't remember where. How topical too, because it would have been in the last couple of weeks since starting this book. So
Hmm.
how topical.
Yeah, it's pretty. I don't know. I thought it was a pretty cool moment. But yeah, I thought that was interesting. So anyway, so they start returning fire, but obviously since he's got him at range, he's at an advantage. And as he's shooting, the doors start slamming shut. Like he's standing at the end of well, not the end, obviously, but he's standing in this long hallway, and the doors kind of they're slamming shut, one after another. There's the pages are mimicking this, and then the doors finally close and giving them, you know, I mean, obviously, Holloway is still like right there. He could charge at them and probably get to them, but it gives them this moment of concealment and of reprieve.
And next thing we know, they're back at the staircase.
Yeah.
So how it handled it with them finding Jed and Wax was we
Hmm.
get it from the perspective of Jed and Wax with like a beating on the door, and then we have the
Hmm.
entire Navidson expedition side of things, and then it's them getting to the door. Um,
Hmm.
did you, like me, immediately suspect that it was Navidson banging on the door when it was Jed and Wax's perspective before it even went into Navidson going down?
I thought that was a possibility. I also thought there was a couple different possibilities. I was like, is this going to be like the are we going to finally see the Minotaur here? Is this Holloway, or is this just like nothing at all? Is this just the house being weird? You know?
Yeah,
I really wasn't sure what it was going to be.
I was dead set on that being Davidson. I'm like, this is gonna be it because it felt like that very stereotypical horror trope where you think that it's impending doom, but then it ends up being your savior, and
Mhm.
that's what exactly I thought it was going to be. Like the bangings on the door, and I thought to myself, this is Navidson. This is absolutely Navidson. It's gonna be Navidson getting there, especially since we know that time is all wonky there, anyways. So yeah, when Navidson and Reston were hearing the voices on the other side of the wall, I was like, all right, yeah, here it comes. This is when they're gonna get to that door and bust it open and find them there. But
Mhm.
then it did it. It immediately followed with, and then he got shot in the head. So that whole "it's your savior" thing ended up being it is your. It was essentially death knocking on the door
Yeah.
in the end. But yeah, I was thinking from the get go, this is absolutely Navidson. That's about to burst in. So I felt pretty cool about that. But like I said, it comes from a really not popular, but a frequently used trope. So it's not like I have some sort of crazy good instincts on where things are gonna go. It's just yeah, it's probably gonna be this because why wouldn't it be kind of thing.
Mhm. I think I don't know. I think you're probably I don't know. I that's probably a good way to predict it is just it kind of follows the pattern. And that's kind of interesting that here in this section I'm not I'm not sure if this is like intentional or not. But like I was saying with the little bit of the wonky dialogue that we're seeing here, you know, particularly in regards to Reston, it's are we just is he kind of doing this on purpose? He's kind of leaning into this kind of tropey, uh, not only just dialogue, but kind of tropey situations kind of occurring.
Maybe I don't know. It definitely feels kind of strange because it did kind of feel like it went from this found footage horror thriller story to now we are in an action scene,
Hmm.
and that's all fine and good. but it definitely feels. You already said this. It feels like a tonal shift.
And I'm not, with the exception of the dialogue bits, and I don't mean to just beat that dead horse, but I'm not opposed to it necessarily either, because I think there's it's a nice moment, especially with how he lays out the text. It does a great job of really emphasizing all of this moment. But yeah, I don't know, I don't mind it so much.
No, it's not that big of a deal, and it does kind of jump back to its, for lack of a better term, root.
Hmm.
Not long after, once they get back to the staircase and the whole expansion happens while Rustin's going up,
Hmm.
which
Yeah, it's like this idea of the building and release of tension, kind of too.
yeah, which I if they would have just given me the number, I wouldn't have had a frame of reference. But that thing where, by Navidson's estimation, on how, because um, Tom was tossing quarters down to let Navidson
Hmm.
know that the person was up, and they get start moving the next person up the pulley system, because it was Jed's dead body, Wax's dying body, and then Reston. He said it took about 51 minutes for that third coin to come down after the expansion happened while Reston was on his way up. And they have the whole bit where he's like, I don't know, it sounds like an impossible amount of length. And then the editors come in, or Zappano, I don't remember if it was Zappano or an editor, saying that it was like 27,000 miles.
Hmm.
And my first thought was, wow, that's a lot of miles. And then they're like, yeah, it's longer than the circumference of the Earth from the equator, or something like that.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh,
Yeah,
that's a lot of miles. And then
that's going back to what we were saying earlier. That's why I'm like, I don't even know that this could be considered, this space could be considered on Earth.
yeah,
That's kind of one of the things I was thinking about. Is it's I don't know. It's just this. It's just really bizarre. And that was a really good sequence too. Like this idea of, especially as Reston is going up. So they rescue. So they rescue. They bring Wax. They give him a little bit of treatment, but they realize they're going to have to get out of there pretty quick. So they bring Wax out and Jed. They go into the back into the staircase. That's when he radios up, and we talked a little bit about it, where he radios up and he gets a hold of Tom, and there's this moment where Tom is. It looks like he's going to do it. He's going to go down the stairs, which is like this big moment for Tom because the whole time a lot of what we hear from Tom during that the sort of like bit about where showing like what he's been doing while they're down there is basically talking to himself and then working himself into this fear frenzy about the monster out there. And so he starts to descend when he hears the roar of, I guess we will call it the monster, the minotaur, whatever this thing is, like right next to him. And he sprints out, and you feel this moment of, oh man, I can't believe Tom. He's I feel bad, but he's basically screwed them there. And but he comes back and he creates this pulley system, and like you're saying, they set it up, and they get it, and they start extracting Wax and Jed. And so Reston, they load Reston up, and he's got it's got this cool visual. Like he flips open a flare, a green flare, and he's describing seeing him, as he's rising up on the pulley, and then the rope, it kind of like it really tightens and it snaps, and it goes through Navidson's hands, and that was just a terrible. Because I can just feel, just imagining it, just like ripping your flesh there, and just give that the rope burn.
I'm good, man.
And anyway, he starts like going up really fast, and it's this sort of like almost like crash effect. Like he's going up and up, and you hear him like screaming, and I was like, oh, is Reston going to die here as the rope seemingly breaks. But
Nope.
no, it's he manages to live, and I don't know. I'm glad for that. I think Reston is probably my the character I like most at this point, and
Yeah.
it kind of gets into this point at the sort of this thing about the brothers and the biblical story of Esau and Jacob.
God, that felt so useless.
It did in a way because it didn't really link to. I didn't really see either as like an Esau or a Jacob. I think those archetypes, are very. They're I don't know why they are necessarily deployed there because I think Navidson and Tom. Well, there's really all you learn a lot more about them just by just saying that rather than the story. Like this idea that Navidson, we mostly refer to him by his last name, and people that get referred to by their last name are usually of a certain vintage. You know what I mean? Like they're usually very type A people that are very like serious and into their whatever their field is, their work.
Yeah.
And then you got Tom. We refer to him as Tom. This very which is a in and of itself it's a nickname. You're constantly referring to him, and you to me that's a lot more explicative and a lot more telling of the differences in their personalities than the story of Esau and Jacob, which is an interesting story and one that I think there's I think we ought to really I mean I think there's some questions about why exactly Isaac made the choices that he did there, um, and to what why the blessing once conferred cannot be conferred to the other. I don't know. There's some interesting thoughts there, but
I just don't really
they also
feel
go ahead.
I just don't really feel like it's an apt comparison between the two of them because
Correct.
you have two brothers, one of which is like I'm going to go be a famous photographer and put myself in danger and take these photographs and stuff. And then you have the other brother who's just a yeah, I don't know, I'm just going to live my life, whatever, man. It's all cool. Just give me some beer and some weed and I'm a happy camper. And that's really kind of the extent of it. Like yeah, there's
I I
the
just I just want to throw this out here really briefly. That is a kind of guy that cannot exist anymore. Like they do exist, but they cannot live on the same standard of living that Tom did, and that is like Tom. He's able to take like he at this point he's taken weeks off of work, and he's just like chilling, and like he's still able to buy like all the booze and all the stuff that he wants. That's kind of crazy in its own way. Like he's not a particularly industrious person, but he's able to, afford all this stuff.
yeah.
But I
But
think it's kind of interesting this because he tries to, or Danielewski kind of contrasts them in this way. Like they are both, and this is another one of the big themes of this book. The responses to this traumatic upbringing with their narcissistic parents, and so you have one in Navidson who just he draws the line in the sand, and he's like, no, I will. The world will see me. I will do. I will exert my will upon the world, and my life will go this certain way. And if it doesn't, well, at least I died. Trying. And then you have Tom, there, who is very much a just kind of floating along kind of guy, like you were saying. I think that was kind of interesting. Is like this. I thought that was a lot more interesting and a lot more apt than the specific invocation of of the story of Isaac and then the Jacob and Esau.
yeah, because I don't see how a story about a brother who outwits the other so he can get his father's blessing from God or whatever the hell it was. I don't see how that relates to two brothers who just are kind of diametric opposites.
There was an estrangement, but the thing is they are very unclear about why the estrangement happens, you know?
Yeah.
Because it says they kind of here's the thing. People talk about in the story, they talk about Tom in these very glowing terms, like he's a great guy. I love Tom. Tom is the best. You know, he's and then but but you also get Zampano kind of implying that it's Tom that and his jealousy towards his brother. I think he almost it's almost kind of he's forcing it, and it's kind of incongruous with the other things he's writing because he wants to force this comparison of the two brothers, one who has wronged the other and is he's jealous of the other. You know, it feels. I thought that was very strange that he kind of then tried to like impute all the blame of their estrangement on Tom in acting in ways that do not seem to comport with earlier descriptions of him.
Yeah. Yeah. We spent a lot of time on Navidson today and barely any on Johnny, which I feel like has more to do with what's going on in their respective storylines right now, more so than anything else. Because I do feel like there are things that are worth talking about with Johnny's storyline right now, but it definitely doesn't feel near as pressing. It's just more of a here's more of a day in the life kind of situations. I don't, I like I said, there's exceptions there, like the Pekingese story, which I know we'll want to talk about, but I feel like there's not a lot of new information compared to Navidson. So I think I think we should probably save Johnny for next week, so we can probably
It's
have
kind of
more to go off
interesting
of.
that. Oh, sorry. I just meant to say it's kind of interesting that we've done this where we've created this. We've kind of seemingly fallen into the same dynamic of the story itself, where we're like doing one story a week. Was I think last week was pretty much all Johnny,
Yeah.
and now it's pretty much all Davidson, and now we're gonna go back to all Johnny next week.
Oh, maybe not all Johnny. I guess we'll see how Navidson goes, because I feel like the stuff we needed to talk about Johnny last time was pretty dense. There was a lot to go on, and in terms of the Navidson, it was well. Here's about 15 pages talking about the formula of an echo. Anyways, also yeah, Holloway's kind of a dickhead. All right, cool. Anyways, back to Johnny, which I feel like this is turning into more of Johnny's story than Zappano's story. Which I said,
Zampano is kind of fading out of the narrative,
yeah,
not fully, but he's a lot less important, relatively speaking.
yeah, and I said this time, I said last time that I prefer Johnny's storyline, so I'm fine with that. But yeah, I think there's a lot we could probably delve into next week since we're kind of low on time today. But something I wanted to bring up that I found kind of funny. This was completely unintentional on our parts, but I realized that for every episode we've done so far, we've covered 4 chapters of the book.
Hmm. That is kind of interesting.
Yeah,
I didn't. I don't. That was not planned at all.
it wasn't. It just
In
kind of
fact, it was
happened that
originally
way.
planned that we would do 9 chapters.
Well, we would do 8. We'd stop at the start of chapter 9.
Oh, true. But yeah, this was. It's interesting that we've kind of broken it into these 4 chapter chunks.
Yeah, just purely coincidental. And I looked, and if we kept that pattern going, we would finish the Navidson record at episode 6, which I'd like to be on another book by then. Personally, I don't want to spend 6 episodes on one book, but I don't know. I guess we'll have to see.
Yeah, we'll
I
see.
I feel very
Go ahead.
vindicated right now because at the end of the last episode, I said that we were at the cusp of the book breaking down in terms of its format, and I said I wouldn't be surprised if we started this episode somewhere in the 200 or 300 page range, and we stopped at page 313 for this one, which sounds like a lot because we started on page 107 for this
Yeah.
episode, but it's not because I went from in 2 hours I went from page 122 to 246. And I'm not the fastest reader, so being able to do 124 pages in 2 hours means that a lot of those pages are not full pages. I think I would equate it to about 30 to 40 full length pages across that 124. So yeah, the book broke down real quick. So
Yeah,
those 206 pages that we read for for this chapter for this episode were not 206 pages. Realistically, I honestly don't even think I'd call it 100 pages or even 80
I
for
think
that
like
matter.
I think it's about like 70, 75 somewhere in there.
Maybe, but yeah, it's nice to see that progress in terms of opening my book and seeing how much I've covered and how much is left. It's nice to see that progress finally feeling like I've made a dent in the book.
Hmm.
But I haven't skimmed too far ahead of where we're at, so I don't know how that's going to go moving forward. I know that chapter 13 is full pages from start to finish, and it's like 30 pages long. So I think chapter 13 is going to be a more dense read than probably 9, 10, and 11 combined. Or no, I'd say maybe
Hmm.
9, 10, and 12 combined. 11 was pretty dense considering.
Yeah, there might be kind of breaking into these different. That might be the kind of the thing now. It's like the pattern of like dense and then more open and then dense again. You know.
Yeah. So we'll see. I don't want to throw an estimation out there. I think saying like 400 is be pretty safe. I looked, and the Navidson record goes to like 500 something. I don't remember
Hmm.
exactly what it was. Wow, I opened almost to the end of the Navidson record. I opened 3 pages away from the Navidson record. It goes to 528. In a perfect world, I would like to be done with the Navidson record by next Saturday. That's in terms of the book itself, 215 pages.
Hmm.
Given that we just covered 206, I don't think it's impossible. I did that in 2 nights, by the way. Uh, which, like I
Humble
said,
brag here.
well, I even like I said, it's not actually 206 pages that we read. It was more like 60, 70, and I think 60 or 70 pages in two
I'm
nights is
just
very
messing with you.
respectable. No, no, no. You listen here, okay? I am a very very good reader, okay? Okay, I'm very confident in my reading skills, and I'm very proud of myself. All right.
You studied at the the academy for boys who don't read so good, right?
I studied at Oxford Dictionary.
But
No, I feel like averaging about 30 pages a night because I would say it's like 60, 70. So 30, 35 pages a night is that's honestly I feel like that's kind of a small amount of reading because I had a night where I went, oh god, I had a night where I read like 100 pages in American Psycho in one sitting. I think I read the entire second half of Silence of the Lambs in one sitting, and that was like a 350, 370 page book. So I feel like saying I read 30 pages a night really isn't that much.
yeah,
But with that, I feel like if I didn't start reading it 3 days before we film this one, when given 2 weeks to read, I think I could possibly finish Navidson record before next week. But I actually have to. It comes down to me actually reading.
well,
That's the problem is I need to
there's
sit down and read.
yeah, there's one thing I do want to do also. Uh, I, I assume I know we've talked a little bit about it, but I assume some if anybody's followed along with us uh, or knows a bit about the book. Danielewski's sister was actually, or is, I suppose, a musician, and she wrote an album that works as kind of like a companion piece to the book. Um, I don't know that we don't necessarily have to do like a full review of the album track by track breakdown necessarily, but that's something I would also kind of like to work in at least as we get close to the end, maybe when we know we've got like the next discussion will be the last for this particular topic. I would kind of like to work that in as well.
Welcome to episode 1 of the Sad Boys Music Club.
In my dreams, in my only in my dreams. But I think that would be interesting because it was written and conceived of as a companion piece,
Yeah.
and I think it might be um, useful, at least in some way, of our in our interpretation of the book.
Yeah, that's definitely something that's worth looking into for sure. But yeah, in a perfect world, I'd like to be done with the Navidson record by next Saturday, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, for me, we have the exciting Like a Dragon Ishin is going to be coming out on Tuesday. So I'm going to, I promise I'm going to keep pace with wherever you need to, you need me to be. But I don't know if that we'll be able to finish for next time anyway.
Yeah. But with that, I think that's a nice stopping point. We covered we got caught up on Navidson at least by in terms of where we're at in the book, which is something that we could not have said for episode 1 and 2. So that's nice.
Yeah, this was a very Navidson heavy episode, but
There was
yeah,
a lot to
like we said,
digest.
yeah. But yeah, so I guess we can go ahead and wrap this up here, and next time we'll be a little further on in the book, and hopefully, we'll be making some more progress.
Yeah. Tune in next week for the final episode of House of Leaves. That's right, baby. We're reading 400 pages this week. We're gonna go through the rest of Navidson. We're gonna go through the exhibits. We're gonna go through the appendix, and I'm going to read the glossary too.
You never know. There might be some secrets in the glossary.
Yeah, no. I guess we'll
All
see.
right.
We'll
Well,
see where we end up.
yeah. Well, I'd like to, thanks again, everybody, for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Yep. Have a good weekend.